Karim al-Rahman stood at the expansive window of his penthouse suite at the Burj Al Arab, watching Dubai's glittering skyline with the detached interest of someone who owned several of those gleaming towers. At 32, he had everything money could buy, and the arrogance that came with never hearing the word no. His reflection in the glass showed a man dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, with sharp features and eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit and loss. The party behind him buzzed with the typical sounds of the elite: crystal glasses clinking, forced laughter, and the constant hum of business deals being made. These gatherings had become monotonous. The same faces, the same conversations, the same women vying for his attention. As the heir to one of the Middle East's largest technology and energy conglomerates, he was used to people trying to curry his favor. Bored already, Karim? The voice belonged to Hassan el-Masri, his longtime friend and business rival. Hassan approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to Karim. Or perhaps you're just tired of winning. Karim accepted the glass with a practiced smile. Winning implies there was ever any real competition, Hassan. Hassan's laugh carried a hint of challenge. Always so confident. That's what makes you interesting. He paused, swirling the champagne in his glass. Though I wonder if your success with women has more to do with your bank account than your charm. Are you suggesting otherwise? Karim raised an eyebrow, his pride already prickling at the insinuation. Perhaps. Hassan's eyes gleamed with mischief. Care to prove it? I don't need to prove anything to anyone, Karim replied, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No? Hassan gestured toward the hotel's atrium below. See that girl at the cafe, the one with the book? Through the glass they could see a young woman working behind the counter. Unlike the polished socialites at the party, she wore a simple uniform and carried herself with quiet dignity. I bet you couldn't get her to fall in love with you, Karim scoffed. That's hardly a challenge. Not just fall in love, Hassan continued, his voice dropping. I mean really fall in love enough to marry you. No money involved. She has to want you for who you are. He paused for effect. If such a person exists. The implication stung more than Karim wanted to admit. He'd built his life on the certainty that everything and everyone had a price. The idea that someone might be immune to his wealth and influence was both foreign and irritating. And what would make this interesting for me? Karim asked, though he already knew he would accept. He never backed down from a challenge. If you succeed, I'll give you that piece of land in Dubai Marina you've been eyeing for your next development. Hassan smiled. If you fail, I get your stake in the new tech startup we've been competing over. Karim studied the woman below. She was attractive in an understated way, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and an air of complete disinterest in the wealthy patrons around her. She seemed absorbed in her book during the quiet moments between customers, barely glancing up at the luxury surrounding her. Time frame? Karim asked, already strategizing. 6 months should be enough for someone of your talents. Hassan's tone carried a hint of mockery. Unless you're not up to it? Karim's pride flared. 6 months to make a cafe worker fall in love with him? He'd accomplished far more difficult tasks in less time. Done, he said, extending his hand. But remember, Hassan, I never lose. As they shook hands, neither man noticed the subtle smile that crossed Hassan's face. Below them, the young woman, Sarah Nasser, continued her work, unaware that she had just become the center of a game that would change multiple lives forever. That night, as Karim prepared his strategy, he felt the familiar thrill of a new challenge. He would approach her tomorrow, turn on the charm that had won over countless women before her, and prove once again that everything in life was negotiable. It would be easy, just another transaction in a life built on them. What he didn't know was that Sarah Nasser was about to become the one variable he couldn't control, the one person who would see through every carefully constructed facade, and the one challenge that would force him to question everything he thought he knew about love, worth, and the true meaning of wealth. The next morning, Karim arrived at the hotel cafe earlier than his usual business meetings would require. He'd exchanged his power suit for designer casual wear, expensive enough to maintain his image, but understated enough not to scream wealth. The cafe was quiet, with only a few early risers occupying the tables. Sarah was there, just as she had been the previous evening, but the morning light revealed details he hadn't noticed before. Her movements were precise and graceful as she prepared drinks, and there was an underlying confidence in her demeanor that seemed at odds with her humble position. She didn't shuffle or hurry like most service workers he encountered. Instead, she moved with purpose, as if each action was part of a greater plan. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter with his most charming smile, the one that had graced numerous magazine covers. "I'll have an American coffee, please." Sarah looked up from the espresso machine she was cleaning, her expression professional but distant. "Of course, sir, that will be 28 dirhams." Karim pulled out his wallet, deliberately selecting a large bill. "Keep the change." "Thank you, but I can't accept tips," she replied, efficiently counting out his exact change. "Hotel policy." He noticed she didn't even glance at the expensive watch on his wrist or the designer logo on his shirt, details that usually drew immediate attention. "That's an unusual policy." "Not really." She turned to prepare his coffee, her tone matter-of-fact. "It ensures equal service for all customers, regardless of their ability to tip." Karim leaned against the counter, intrigued despite himself. "You agree with that philosophy?" "I believe in earning what I receive," she answered, placing his coffee before him. Her eyes met his directly for the first time. They were a deep brown with flecks of gold, intelligent and evaluating. "Through honest work, not generosity or circumstance." The subtle dig at his obvious wealth wasn't lost on him. Instead of irritating him as it should have, it sparked his curiosity. "And what honest work do you dream of doing? Surely not serving coffee forever?" A slight smile crossed her face, not the impressed or flirtatious ones he was used to, but rather amused, as if she found his assumption entertaining. "My current position serves its purpose. It funds my education and provides flexible hours. For my community work?" "Community work?" He took a sip of his coffee. It was perfectly prepared, he had to admit. "Yes." She began wiping down the counter, clearly considering the conversation over. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Karim wasn't used to being dismissed so easily. "Actually, I'm interested in community work myself. My company has a substantial charitable foundation." It wasn't entirely a lie. The foundation existed, though he usually left its management to others. Sarah paused in her cleaning, giving him a look that suggested she knew exactly what kind of charitable foundation he meant, the kind that existed primarily for tax benefits and public relations. "How wonderful," she said, her tone neutral. "I'm sure your accountants appreciate that." Before he could respond, another customer approached the counter, and Sarah turned her attention to them with genuine warmth, a stark contrast to her cool professionalism with him. Karim found himself lingering over his coffee, watching as she interacted with various customers. With some, she exchanged friendly words in Arabic. With others, she spoke in fluent English or French. She seemed to remember regular customers' orders and asked about their families or studies. It was a masterclass in genuine human connection, something Karim realized he knew very little about, despite all his networking skills and business acumen. His interactions were always calculated, always aimed at gaining something. Sarah's seemed to come from a place of genuine interest in people, regardless of what they could offer her. As the morning rush began to pick up, Karim reluctantly prepared to leave. He had meetings to attend, deals to close, but for the first time in years, the thought of his usual power plays and negotiations seemed somehow hollow. "The coffee was excellent," he said as he stood to leave. "Thank you," Sarah replied, barely glancing up from the drink she was preparing. "Have a good day, sir." Walking out of the cafe, Karim felt oddly unsettled. He had approached the situation as he did everything else in his life, with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. But Sarah had seen through his practiced charm as if it were transparent. His wealth, his status, his carefully cultivated image, none of it had made the slightest impression. In his car, as his driver navigated through Dubai's morning traffic, Karim found himself thinking about Sarah's words about honest work and earning what you receive. He had been born into wealth, had never known what it meant to truly earn something from nothing. The thought was uncomfortable, and he pushed it aside, focusing instead on how to adjust his strategy. He would need a different approach, that much was clear. But as he reviewed their interaction, he realized something else. For the first time in years, he was genuinely intrigued by someone, not for what they could offer him, but for who they were. It was an unfamiliar feeling, and he wasn't sure he liked it. Little did he know this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the world he had built around him. Over the next few weeks, Karim found himself developing a routine he'd never imagined. Every morning he would arrive at the cafe, order his coffee, and attempt to engage Sarah in conversation. Each interaction left him more frustrated and, surprisingly, more fascinated than the last. She remained politely distant, treating him with the same professional courtesy she showed all customers. No more, no less. One morning, he noticed her reading a thick textbook during a quiet moment. "Business administration?" he asked, trying to find common ground. Sarah shook her head, a genuine smile appearing as she spoke about her studies for the first time. "Social development and economic empowerment. I'm completing my master's thesis on sustainable community development in urban areas." "That's unexpected," Karim admitted, genuinely surprised. He'd assumed she was studying something more conventional. "Because I work in a cafe?" There was that hint of challenge in her voice again. "No, because it's not a field that typically leads to financial success," he replied honestly. Sarah's eyes met his, and for once there was more curiosity than dismissal in her gaze. "Success can be measured in many ways, Mr. Al-Rahman. Not all of them involve profit margins." It was the first time she'd used his name, revealing that she knew exactly who he was. Of course she did. His face was frequently in business magazines and local news. "Call me Karim," he said, seizing the opening. "And how do you measure success, Sarah?" She seemed to consider whether to answer, weighing his sincerity. "By the number of lives improved, not bank accounts enlarged." She paused, then added, "I'm developing a program for youth entrepreneurship in underserved communities, teaching them how to build sustainable businesses that serve their neighborhoods." "That sounds," he searched for the right word, "idealistic." "Realistic," she corrected. "These communities don't need handouts or charity galas. They need tools, education, and opportunities to build their own futures." There was passion in her voice now, breaking through her usual reserve. Karim found himself drawn into the conversation, despite his initial skepticism. "And you believe small businesses can make that kind of impact?" "I know they can. I've seen it." She hesitated, then continued, "My father owned a small bookshop in our neighborhood. It wasn't just a store, it was a community hub. Children would come to read after school. Elderly neighbors would gather to discuss literature and politics. When he became ill," she paused, composing herself, "the community came together to help keep it running. That's real wealth, Mr. Al-Rahman, the kind that can't be measured in dirhams." The personal revelation surprised him, both in its content and the fact that she'd shared it at all. "What happened to the bookshop?" "It still exists, run by my father's former assistant. I help when I can between studies and work." She glanced at him, adding quietly, "Not all of us have the luxury of focusing on just one thing." The subtle criticism stung, but Karim found himself more interested in understanding than defending himself. "Would you show me?" "Show you what?" "The bookshop. These communities you want to help. I'd like to see what you see." Sarah studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Why?" It was a simple question, but Karim realized he didn't have a simple answer. The bet with Hassan seemed suddenly distant, almost forgotten. "Because I think I need to." She considered this, then wrote something on a piece of paper. "Saturday morning, 9 a.m. This is the address. Don't wear anything expensive." She handed him the paper with a hint of challenge in her eyes. "If you're serious about understanding, come alone. No drivers, no entourage." Karim looked at the address. It was in one of Dubai's older neighborhoods, far from the gleaming towers and luxury hotels he frequented. "I'll be there." "We'll see," Sarah replied, her tone suggesting she didn't really expect him to show up. As he left the cafe that morning, Karim felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the need to prove himself worthy of someone's expectations rather than the other way around. The feeling was both unsettling and oddly exhilarating. In his office later that day, he found himself researching community development programs instead of focusing on his usual market reports. The concepts Sarah had mentioned, sustainable development, community empowerment, social entrepreneurship, were foreign to his usual worldview of profit maximization and market dominance. Hassan called, curious about his progress with the bet. "How's our little game going?" "It's progressing," Karim replied vaguely, realizing he hadn't thought about the bet in days. "Remember, time is ticking," Hassan reminded him. "Don't tell me you're losing your touch." Karim ended the call quickly, uncomfortable with the reminder of how this had all started. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to question, not just his approach to the challenge, but the very values that had defined his existence until now. Saturday morning arrived with Karim standing on a street he'd never visited before, wearing the most casual clothes he owned, which he realized too late were still obviously designer brands. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to his usual environment. Narrow streets lined with small shops, their signs a mix of Arabic and English, laundry strung between buildings, and children playing soccer with a worn ball in the street. The bookshop was modest but well maintained, with books displayed in the window and a hand-painted sign that read Nasser's Books and Community Center in both Arabic and English. Through the window, he could see shelves packed with books and a few comfortable reading chairs. As he hesitated outside, Sarah appeared at his elbow, surprising him. "You came," she said, not quite hiding her surprise. She was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "I said I would," he replied, slightly defensive. "Yes, you did." She studied him for a moment. "Ready to see how the other half lives?" Inside, the bookshop was bigger than it appeared from outside, with a warm, inviting atmosphere. The smell of books mingled with the aroma of coffee from a small cafe area in the corner. What struck Karim most was how alive the place felt. Several elderly men were engaged in an animated discussion over coffee, while a group of children sat on cushions in a corner, reading together. "My father started this place 30 years ago," Sarah explained, leading him through the shop. "He believed that books could change lives, but more importantly, that people needed a place to come together, to learn and share ideas." An older man behind the counter looked up as they passed. "Sarah, I wasn't expecting you today." His eyes fell on Karim with obvious curiosity. "Mr. Kumar has been running the shop since my father became ill," Sarah explained. "He knows every book and every customer by name." They climbed a narrow staircase to a second floor Karim hadn't noticed from outside. Here, he found something unexpected, a small computer lab and classroom space. Several teenagers were working at the computers, while a young volunteer helped them with what appeared to be coding exercises. "This is part of our youth program," Sarah explained. "We teach digital literacy, basic programming, and business skills. Many of these kids don't have computers at home, but they have brilliant minds and incredible potential." Karim watched as one young girl proudly showed her completed website to the volunteer. The joy on her face when she received praise was genuine and touching. "Who funds all this?" "We piece it together," Sarah said. "Community donations, small grants, volunteer work. The bookshop's profits help, though they're modest. We do what we can with what we have." As they toured the facility, Karim's business mind couldn't help but notice the opportunities for improvement. Outdated computers that could be upgraded, space that could be better utilized, programs that could be expanded with proper funding. But he also saw something he'd never encountered in his luxury towers and corporate boardrooms: genuine community, people helping each other without expectation of return. A young boy approached Sarah holding up a book. "Miss Sarah, can you help me with this word?" She knelt down to his level, spending several minutes helping him sound out the difficult word, her patience and genuine interest in his progress obvious. The boy beamed when he finally got it right, and Karim felt something shift inside him. a recognition that this kind of impact couldn't be measured in profit margins. "Why do you work at the hotel?" he asked later, as they sat in the cafe corner with cups of Arabic coffee that cost a fraction of what he usually paid, but tasted twice as good. "With your education and skills, you could do this full-time." Sarah's eyes met his, serious and determined. "Because change requires resources, Karim. The hotel job pays for my education and helps support this place. Every dirham counts. But with proper funding..." "We've had offers," she interrupted. "Large corporations wanting to help by turning this into another standardized learning center with their logos everywhere. But that's not what this community needs. They need something that belongs to them, that they help build and maintain." Karim felt the criticism implied in her words, but couldn't deny the truth in them. How many times had his company's charitable foundation slapped its logo on projects without really understanding the communities they claimed to help? As they continued their tour, meeting more community members and seeing more of the programs in action, Karim found himself increasingly impressed, not just by Sarah's dedication, but by her practical understanding of what her community needed. She wasn't just an idealist. She was a skilled organizer and leader who had earned the trust and respect of everyone around her. The morning stretched into afternoon, and Karim realized he had missed several calls and messages, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. But for the first time in his life, he found himself completely absorbed in something that had nothing to do with profit or power. As they walked back to where his car was parked, Sarah turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Thank you for coming today. I know this isn't your usual Saturday morning activity." "Thank you for..." "Showing me," he replied, meaning it. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." She raised an eyebrow. "Help or take over?" The question made him pause, forcing him to examine his own motives. A month ago, he would have seen this as a perfect opportunity to impress her, to win the bet. Now, he wasn't so sure what he wanted anymore. In the weeks that followed his visit to the bookshop, Karim found himself living in two increasingly distinct worlds. In one, he continued his role as the powerful business magnate, attending board meetings and making million-dollar decisions. In the other, he spent time at the community center, gradually learning about a world he'd never known existed. He began by quietly upgrading the computer lab, careful to do so through Mr. Kumar rather than directly. When Sarah noticed the new equipment, she gave him a knowing look but didn't comment. Instead, she put him to work, teaching basic business skills to a group of eager teenagers who dreamed of starting their own enterprises. "Remember," he told them during one session, "a successful business isn't just about profit. It's about understanding your community's needs and finding sustainable ways to meet them." The words surprised him, as much as they did Sarah, who was observing from the doorway. "You're learning," she said afterward, a hint of approval in her voice. "I had a good teacher," he replied, watching her sort through donation requests from local families. Their relationship had evolved into something he couldn't quite define. She was no longer coldly professional, but neither was she falling for his usual charms. Instead, they had developed a partnership of sorts, each bringing their unique perspectives to the challenges they faced. But the weight of his initial deception grew heavier with each passing day. Hassan had begun sending increasingly pointed messages about the bet, reminding Karim that time was running out. The messages felt like stones in his pocket, dragging him down just when he was beginning to feel genuinely light for the first time in his life. One evening, as they worked late at the community center, Sarah shared her vision for expanding the program. "We could create a network of these centers," she explained, her eyes bright with passion. "Each one tailored to its community's needs, but connected for resource sharing and support." Karim found himself captivated not just by the idea, but by her entire presence. The way her hands moved as she spoke, the intelligence behind her eyes, the genuine care she showed for every person who walked through the door. He realized with a jolt of clarity that he had fallen in love with her, not because of a bet, but despite it. "Sarah," he began, the urge to confess everything suddenly overwhelming. But before he could continue, his phone buzzed with a message from Hassan. "Time's almost up, my friend. Ready to admit defeat?" The message snapped him back to reality. What had started as a game had become something real, something precious, but it was built on a foundation of lies. Would she ever forgive him if she knew the truth? Could anything genuine grow from such a deceptive beginning? Is everything okay? Sarah asked, noticing his distraction. Just business, he replied automatically. Hating himself for the continued deception, she studied him for a moment. You know, when you first started coming here, I thought you were just another rich man trying to ease his conscience with charity work, but you've proven me wrong. You've actually listened, learned, and helped without trying to take control. It's impressive. Her words, meant as a compliment, felt like accusations. Every genuine moment between them had been shadowed by his initial lie. Yet he couldn't bring himself to confess, afraid of losing not just her, but the sense of purpose he'd found in this work. Later that night, in his luxury apartment overlooking the city, Karim stood at his window, much as he had the night this all began. But now he saw the city differently. Beyond the gleaming towers and luxury hotels, he could see the other Dubai, the one where people like Sarah worked tirelessly to build something meaningful, something that couldn't be bought or sold. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Hassan. Dinner tomorrow night. Time to settle our bet. Karim stared at the message for a long time. He had a choice to make. He could continue with the deception, try to win the bet, and risk losing everything genuine he'd built with Sarah. Or he could tell her the truth, likely losing her but at least maintaining his newfound integrity. The four. Next morning at the cafe, Sarah greeted him with a warm smile that made his heart ache. I've been thinking about your suggestion for the youth entrepreneurship program, she said, her excitement evident. I think we could really make it work. Looking at her, seeing the trust and respect that had grown between them, Karim made his decision. He couldn't let this lie continue. But before he could speak, Hassan walked into the cafe, a predatory smile on his face. Well, Hassan said loudly, approaching their counter. How's our little experiment going, Karim? Has she fallen for your act yet? The color drained from Sarah's face as she looked between them. What experiment? The cafe fell silent, as Hassan's words hung in the air. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, and finally to something that made Karim's heart constrict, deep, profound disappointment. Sarah, I can explain, Karim started, but Hassan cut him off with a laugh. Oh, please do explain, Hassan said, clearly enjoying the moment. Tell her about our little bet. Tell her how you were supposed to make her fall in love with you within 6 months. What was at stake again? Ah, yes, that prime piece of real estate. In the marina. Sarah's hands, usually so steady as they prepared drinks, trembled slightly as she gripped the counter. A bet, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. All of this was for a bet? It started that way, Karim admitted, knowing that lying now would only make things worse. But it changed. I changed. Changed? Sarah's laugh was bitter. You mean you found a better strategy? Realized that playing the reformed billionaire would work better than flashing your wealth? The customers in the cafe were trying to pretend. They weren't listening, but the tension in the air was palpable. Hassan stood back, watching the scene unfold with obvious satisfaction. The computers for the center, Sarah continued, realization dawning in her eyes. The business classes. Was any of it real, or was it all just part of your investment? The programs we developed together were real, Karim insisted, reaching for her hand across the counter. She pulled back as if his touch would burn her. The work we did, the impact we had, that was all real. But the foundation was a lie, she said, her voice growing stronger with anger. You came into our community, into my father's legacy, under false pretenses. You turned people's lives, their hopes and dreams into pieces in your game. Hassan cleared his throat. Well, I think it's clear who won, or rather, who lost our little wager. The property deed will be on your desk tomorrow, Karim. Keep it, Karim snapped, not even looking at Hassan. Sarah, please, let me explain everything. Explain what? She demanded. How you saw us all as some kind of social experiment. How you measured your progress by how quickly you could make me fall in love with you. Her voice caught on the last words. and the pain in it was worse than if she had shouted. A small crowd had gathered now, including some of the teens from the community center who sometimes stopped by the cafe. Their faces showed confusion and hurt, and Karim realized with growing horror how far-reaching the impact of his deception would be. "I need you to leave," Sarah said, her professional mask sliding back into place, though her eyes blazed with suppressed emotion. "Both of you. Now." "Come on, Karim," Hassan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I know a great place where we can celebrate your failure properly." Karim shrugged off Hassan's hand. "This isn't a game anymore, Hassan. These are people's lives we're talking about." "Oh, spare me the moral awakening," Hassan scoffed. "You were happy enough to play along until you lost. Face it, she was never going to fall for someone like you, no matter how well you played the reformed philanthropist." "You're wrong," Karim said quietly. "She did make me want to change, just not in the way I expected." Sarah had turned her back on both of them, methodically cleaning equipment that didn't need cleaning. Her shoulders were rigid with tension, but she didn't acknowledge their continued presence. "Miss Sarah," one of the teenagers from the center approached the counter hesitantly. "Are you okay?" She turned, and Karim saw her force a smile for the young girl's benefit. "I'm fine, Amira. Why don't you head to the center? I'll be there later for the coding class." "But what about Mr. Karim's business lesson?" another student asked. The innocent question seemed to physically pain Sarah. "There won't be any more lessons," she said firmly. "Please, spread the word to the others." Karim felt each word like a physical blow. He had spent months building trust, creating genuine connections with these young people, helping them develop their dreams. And in one moment it had all crumbled because of a bet he'd almost forgotten about. "Sarah," he tried one last time, "what I feel for you—" "Don't," she cut him off, finally meeting his eyes. "Don't you dare try to justify this. You took something pure and meaningful and turned it into a game. Whatever you think you feel, whatever you think changed, it doesn't matter. The foundation was a lie, and everything built on it is tainted." Her words struck at the heart of his own fears. He had changed, had grown to care deeply about the community and its people, had fallen genuinely in love with Sarah. But could anything real grow from such deceptive beginnings? As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the cafe window. He saw what Sarah must see, not the changed man he'd become, but the arrogant billionaire who had walked in months ago, viewing people's lives as pieces in his game of conquest. The weeks following the revelation at the cafe were the darkest of Karim's life. The carefully constructed world he'd built began to crumble around him. News of the bet spread through Dubai's elite circles, but not in the way Hassan had probably intended. Instead of painting Karim as the usual playboy billionaire, the story revealed something worse, a man who had manipulated a community's hopes and dreams for a wager. His corporate board members began questioning his judgment. The business. Partners withdrew from deals, citing concerns about his integrity. The press, which had once fawned over his every move, now painted him as a symbol of everything wrong with the ultra-wealthy elite. But none of that compared to the pain of being banned from the community center and watching his genuine efforts to help being dismantled. The new computers were returned, the business programs suspended. Sarah had made it clear through Mr. Kumar that any resources connected to Karim were to be removed. One morning, he found himself driving past the hotel, slowing down as he approached the cafe. Through the window, he could see Sarah working, her movements as graceful as ever, but there was a new stiffness to her shoulders, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. He didn't stop. In his office, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth, Karim felt more lost than ever. The view from his window no longer impressed him. The expensive art on his walls seemed meaningless. Everything he had once valued felt hollow. "Your 10 a.m. meeting with the investors from Singapore is cancelled," his assistant informed him. "They've decided to pursue other opportunities." Karim barely acknowledged the news. Another deal lost, another consequence of his actions. His phone buzzed with a message from Hassan. "Drink tonight. I know a great place where no one will recognize you." The message sparked something in Karim, not anger, but clarity. He had spent his entire life measuring his worth through victories over others, through acquisitions and conquests. Sarah had shown him a different way to measure success, and he had learned the lesson too late. Or had he? That afternoon he called an emergency board meeting. The board members arrived expecting damage control strategies, or perhaps his resignation. Instead, they found Karim with a new proposal. "We're restructuring our charitable foundation," he announced. "No more vanity projects, no more surface-level donations. We're going to create a genuine impact investment fund, focusing on community-led development initiatives." "The shareholders won't like this," one board member warned. "Our stock price has already taken a hit." "Then let it fall," Karim replied. "For once, we're going to do something because it's right, not because it's profitable." He spent the next days developing a comprehensive plan. The foundation would be independently managed, with community leaders having a strong voice in decision-making. All programs would be developed based on actual community needs, not corporate PR goals. When Hassan heard about the changes, he was incredulous. "You've lost your mind," he declared over an unwanted lunch meeting. "All this because of some girl and a failed bet." "No," Karim replied calmly. "All this because for the first time in my life, I saw the real value of what I could do with my resources. You did me a favor, Hassan. You helped me lose everything that didn't matter and find what does." He threw himself into the work, but differently than before. This time he stayed in the background, letting community leaders take the spotlight. He hired experts in sustainable development and social enterprise, many recommended by Sarah's professors and colleagues. The media noticed the change. Stories began appearing about the transformation of the Al-Rahman Foundation, though Karim refused all interview requests. He didn't want this to be about him anymore. One evening, working late in his office, he received an unexpected visitor. Mr. Kumar stood in his doorway, looking somewhat out of place in the corporate setting. "She doesn't know I'm here," the older man said without preamble. "But I've been watching what you're doing. The new programs you're funding, the way you're letting communities lead. It's what she always dreamed of." "How is she?" Karim couldn't help asking. "Hurt," Mr. Kumar replied honestly, "but strong. The center is struggling without the resources you provided, but she's determined to make it work. She's trying to secure new grants, working extra shifts at the cafe." The news pained Karim, but he knew he couldn't simply step in and fix everything with money anymore. That wasn't what Sarah or the community needed. "Tell me what they need," he said instead. "Not from me. Tell me what kind of programs and support they're looking for. I'll make sure the Foundation's new grant committees know about opportunities in that area." Mr. Kumar smiled slightly. "You really have changed, haven't you?" "I'm trying to," Karim replied. "Not for her, not anymore. But because she showed me what real impact looks like, and I can't go back to pretending that doesn't matter." 3 months after the revelation of the bet, Dubai's social landscape had shifted dramatically. The Al-Rahman Foundation, once known for its glittering charity galas and superficial donations, had transformed into a serious player in community development. The foundation's new board, composed largely of community leaders and development experts, had already launched several successful initiatives across the city. Karim had stepped back from the foundation's public face, instead focusing on ensuring its independence and proper funding. He spent his days in meetings with community organizers, social entrepreneurs, and education specialists, learning from their experiences and perspectives. His nights were often spent reviewing grant proposals and impact reports, work that would have bored him months ago, but now gave him a sense of purpose. One afternoon, he received an unexpected email. A major international development conference was being held in Dubai, and among the speakers was Sarah Nasser, presenting her research on community-led urban development. Without thinking, he registered to attend, choosing a seat in the back of the conference hall. When Sarah took the stage, Karim felt his heart skip. She looked different, more confident if possible, wearing a professional suit but speaking with the same passion he remembered from their conversations at the community center. Her presentation focused on the importance of genuine community engagement in development projects, using her work at the center as a case study. "The key to sustainable community development isn't just funding," she explained to the audience. It's respect. Respect for local knowledge, local leadership, and local dreams. Too often, well-meaning organizations come into communities thinking they know better, trying to impose solutions from above. True change happens when we empower communities to lead their own development. During the Q&A session, someone asked about funding challenges. Sarah's response was measured but clear. Yes, resources are important, but they must come without strings, without egos, without the expectation of control. We've had experiences with donors who saw our community as a project rather than as people. That kind of involvement, no matter how well funded, does more harm than good. Karim felt the weight of her words, knowing they were partly directed at his past actions, but he also recognized the truth in them, a truth that had fundamentally changed how he approached his work with the foundation. After the presentation, he overheard other attendees discussing the foundation's recent work, not knowing its chairman was within earshot. They spoke about how the organization had become a model for genuine community engagement, how its new approach was influencing other foundations in the region. As the conference broke for lunch, Karim found himself in line at a cafe across from the convention center. To his surprise, he recognized several of the teens from the community center at a nearby table, wearing conference badges. They were animatedly discussing the morning's sessions, taking notes and sharing ideas. Mr. Al-Rahman, one of them, had noticed him. It was Amira, the girl who had once been so excited about his business classes. She approached hesitantly. "Hello, Amira," he replied, unsure of his welcome. "How are you?" "Good," she said, glancing back at her friends. "We're here representing the center's youth leadership program. Miss Sarah helped us get sponsorships to attend." "That's wonderful," he said sincerely. "Are you still interested in starting your own business?" Amira's face lit up. "Actually, we've started a small web design cooperative. Some of us learned coding, others handled the business side. We're doing real work for local businesses now, using what you learned in the program," he observed. "Yes," she admitted, then added quietly, "What you taught us wasn't wrong, Mr. Al-Rahman. The way you taught it might have been complicated, but the knowledge was real." Her words touched him deeply. "Thank you, Amira, that means a lot." "The center's different now," she continued. "Smaller programs, fewer resources. But Miss Sarah says it's more important to build slowly with integrity than quickly with compromise." Before Karim could respond, he noticed Sarah entering the cafe. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and for a moment, he saw something flicker in her expression. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but recognition. Recognition of the changes he'd made, the person he was becoming. She didn't approach him, but she nodded slightly before turning to join her colleagues. It was a small gesture, but to Karim it felt like the first ray of sun after a long storm. That evening, he sat in his office reviewing the Foundation's latest reports. The numbers showed modest but sustainable growth in their programs, real impact in communities across Dubai. It wasn't the rapid expansion his business mind had once craved, but he understood now what Sarah had been trying to teach him all along. True change, like trust, had to be built carefully, honestly, one day at a time. 1 year had passed since the day Hassan had revealed the bet at the cafe. Dubai's skyline remained as impressive as ever, but Karim viewed it differently now. From his office window, he could see beyond the gleaming towers to the communities that gave the city its true heart. The Al-Rahman Foundation had become a case study in corporate transformation. Business schools were writing about how a traditional charitable foundation had evolved into a pioneer of community-led development. Karim had declined all interviews, letting the work speak for itself. One morning, his assistant brought him a familiar-looking grant application. The NASA Community Center was applying for funding to expand its youth entrepreneurship program. The proposal was comprehensive, detailing the center's track record and community impact. Sarah's name was there as program director, alongside Mr. Kumar and several community board members. Karim immediately recused himself from the decision-making process, ensuring the application would be evaluated solely on its merits by the Foundation's independent committee. Weeks later, when he learned the center had received the grant, he felt a quiet satisfaction. They had earned it, completely on their own. Through various channels, he heard about the center's progress. The youth coding program had evolved into A successful social enterprise, with students like Amira now teaching new participants. The bookshop had expanded its community programs, becoming a model for similar initiatives across the city. Hassan, meanwhile, had tried several times to reconnect, unable to understand Karim's transformation. "You've become boring," he complained, during an unwanted lunch meeting. "All this social responsibility nonsense, what happened to the man who knew how to enjoy his wealth?" "He learned what real wealth looks like," Karim replied, leaving Hassan to pay for a lunch he hadn't wanted to attend. One afternoon, Karim was surprised to find Mr. Kumar waiting in his office. The older man looked pleased about something. "The foundation's grant has made a significant difference," Mr. Kumar said without preamble. "But more importantly, you kept your distance. No strings, no public relations campaigns, no attempts to take credit," Sarah noticed. Karim tried to maintain his professional composure, but his heart quickened at her name. The center deserved the support. The committee made their decision based on merit alone. "Yes," Mr. Kumar agreed, "but merit alone didn't transform the Al-Rahman Foundation into an organization that would recognize and support genuine community work. That was you." Before Karim could respond, Mr. Kumar placed an invitation on his desk. "The center is celebrating its 15th anniversary next week. A small community gathering, nothing fancy. Sarah suggested you might want to attend." Karim stared at the simple invitation. "She suggested?" "She did," Mr. Kumar confirmed. "Though she also said to tell you it's not a grand gesture of forgiveness, just an acknowledgement that people can change, and that such change deserves recognition." The event was indeed modest, held in the community center itself, with local food, student presentations, and proud parents everywhere. Karim arrived quietly, standing at the back of the room as various community members shared stories about what the center meant to them. When Sarah spoke, her words were not about grand visions or impressive statistics. Instead, she talked about individual successes. Amira's web design cooperative, now employing other youth from the community. A mother who had started a successful catering business after attending their entrepreneurship program. Elderly community members finding companionship and purpose in their reading groups. After the formal presentations, as people mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Sarah approached him. She looked elegant in a simple dress, but it was her quiet confidence that struck him most. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice neutral but not cold. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. "The center, it's incredible what you've achieved." "What the community has achieved," she corrected, gently. Then, after a pause, "Though I heard about some other achievements recently. The Al-Rahman Foundation's new micro-lending program for women entrepreneurs, the educational initiatives in underserved neighborhoods, the focus on community-led development." "I had good teachers," he said simply. Sarah studied him for a moment. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were incapable of seeing beyond your own privilege. I was wrong about that. You were capable. You just needed a reason to look." "I'm sorry it took a bet to make me see," he said quietly. "So am I," she agreed. "But what matters more is what you did after the bet was over. When there was nothing to win except the knowledge that you were doing the right thing." Around them, the community celebration continued, a testament to what could be built when people came together with genuine purpose. Children ran through the room, their laughter mixing with conversations in multiple languages. It was everything Sarah had once described to him, everything he had failed to value properly before. 2 years after the infamous bet, Dubai was hosting the Global Social Impact Summit. The main hall was packed with delegates from around the world, but all eyes were on the unlikely pair sharing the stage, Sarah Nasser and Karim Al-Rahman, presenting their collaborative model of community-led development. "True change," Sarah explained to the audience, "happens when we bridge the gap between resources and reality, between power and purpose. It's not about handouts or control, it's about partnership and respect." Karim followed with the practical aspects. By restructuring traditional charitable foundations to include community leadership and focusing on sustainable development, we've seen unprecedented success rates in our programs. The numbers tell the story. 87% of our supported initiatives continue to thrive after 3 years. Their presentation highlighted various success stories, including the NASA Community Center's expansion into a network of learning hubs across Dubai. Amira, now a confident young woman, had taken the stage earlier to showcase how their youth entrepreneurship program had evolved into a city-wide movement. After the presentation, as attendees crowded around with questions, Hassan appeared at the edge of the group. He looked older somehow, less certain of himself. "Congratulations," he said, addressing both Sarah and Karim. "I have to admit, I didn't see this coming when I made that bet." "Neither did I," Karim replied honestly. "Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted helps you find what you really need." Sarah touched his arm lightly, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. "We should get ready for the workshop session," she reminded him. Their collaborative approach to community development had become so successful that they regularly conducted training sessions for other organizations. Later that evening, they walked through the gardens of the community center, now significantly expanded, but still maintaining its warm, welcoming atmosphere. The sound of children's laughter drifted from the new playground, and lights glowed warmly in the windows of the education building. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Walking away from your old life? The parties, the power plays, the simple certainty that money could solve everything?" Karim considered the question seriously. "I regret the way it started," he said finally. "The bet, the deception, I'll always regret that, but the journey it set me on..." He gestured at the thriving community around them. "How could I regret finding real purpose?" Sarah smiled, a full, genuine smile that still made his heart skip. "You know, when I first realized the truth about the bet, I thought everything was ruined. Every moment, every conversation, every project, I thought it was all tainted by how it began." "It was," Karim acknowledged. "But what came after, that was real. Every change, every step forward, every lesson learned, that was all genuine." They reached the new coffee shop that had replaced the hotel cafe where their story had begun. It was run as a social enterprise now, providing job training for young people from the community. Inside, photos on the walls told the story of the center's growth, including one of Sarah and Karim at the opening of their first satellite location. "I got another offer today," Sarah mentioned casually, "a major international development organization. They want me to head their Middle East division." Karim felt his heart sink, though he tried not to show it. "That's incredible, you deserve it." "I turned it down," she said, watching his reaction. "My work is here. Our work is here." The word "our" hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past year, rebuilding from the ashes of betrayal into something stronger, more genuine. Every step had been careful, considered, built on actions rather than words. "I was thinking," Sarah continued, "about expanding the entrepreneurship program to include more women from traditional backgrounds. There's so much untapped potential there." "I know that look," Karim smiled. "You've already got a plan." "Maybe," she admitted, "but I'll need a partner. Someone who understands both worlds, the corporate and the community. Someone who's proven they can change and help others change too." Karim looked at her, this remarkable woman who had first challenged him to be better, then inspired him to actually do it. "I think I know someone who might be interested." Outside, the Dubai sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, a backdrop to the community they'd helped build together. Children played in the center's courtyard, elderly readers gathered in the expanded library, and young entrepreneurs worked on their projects in the new tech hub. "You know what I learned?" Karim said softly. "True love, like true change, can't be won through games or bets. It has to be earned day by day, choice by choice." Sarah took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Then I suppose we'd better keep making good choices." As they stood together, watching their shared vision continue to unfold, both knew that this wasn't an ending but a beginning. Their story had started with a bet, but it would continue with purpose, partnership, and the kind of love that transforms not just two people, but entire communities. In the end, Karim had lost a bet, but gained something far more valuable. A life of meaning. A love built on respect and the knowledge that real wealth isn't measured in dirhams, but in the lives you touch and the changes you inspire. The lights of Dubai twinkled around them, no longer symbols of power and privilege, but beacons of possibility. Reminders that even in a city of gold, the richest treasures are the connections we forge and the good we do in the world. Fim Day. Historia. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Karim and Sarah has touched your hearts and shown you that true transformation is possible when we open ourselves to genuine change. This tale of love, redemption, and community impact reminds us that our greatest achievements often come from our biggest challenges. If you've enjoyed this story of personal growth and genuine connection, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. We bring you unique narratives every day that explore the depth of human experience and the power of transformation. Join our community of storytelling lovers and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your next favorite story is just a click away.